Grace Martin sat quietly in the back row of the lecture hall, her shoulders hunched, her pen scratching across the worn-out pages of her notebook. Around her, laughter echoed, classmates whispering jokes, scrolling on shiny laptops, and sneaking glances at her faded blouse. To them, Grace was the poor girl who wore the same outfits every week and survived on soya milk and bread buns. They didn't see the sleepless nights, the heavy burdens, or the strength it took just to show up. Her stomach tightened with hunger, but she ignored it. Every coin she earned went to her brother Daniel's hospital bills. For 2 years he had been in a coma, and Grace had promised him she would not give up, not on her studies, not on him. That meant tutoring students for meager pay, serving food at a local eatery, and playing piano at a lounge deep into the night. Survival had a price, and she paid it daily. Suddenly, the heavy doors creaked open. The air shifted. Whispers filled the hall. That's him. Edward Walker. Edward, the billionaire CEO, walked in with the calm authority of a man used to commanding rooms. His tailored suit caught the light, his sharp gaze scanned the crowd, and silence followed him like a shadow. Today he was the guest lecturer, invited to speak on leadership and global business. Grace lowered her head, praying he wouldn't notice her. But her body betrayed her exhaustion. Her eyelids drooped, her pen slipped, and the next moment, the room spun. She collapsed forward, her notebook scattering onto the floor. Gasps filled the hall. Students pulled out phones, whispering mockingly. But Edward froze mid-sentence. For the first time, his cold expression cracked. He stepped down quickly, moving through the rows until he stood beside her. "Get her some water," he ordered firmly, his deep voice silencing the chaos. Grace's eyes fluttered open, and for a moment all she saw was his face, stern yet unexpectedly concerned. "You fainted," he said softly, crouching beside her. "When was the last time you ate?" Embarrassment burned her cheeks. "I'm fine, sir. I just didn't sleep much." Edward studied her pale face, her trembling hands. He had noticed her before, the quiet girl who never joined the noise, always writing carefully, always looking tired. But seeing her up close now, thin and fragile, something stirred in him. "Rest. Don't argue," he said firmly, helping her sit upright. The hall buzzed with shock. It wasn't every day that Edward Walker, the untouchable billionaire, stopped everything for a struggling student. Grace wished she could disappear, wished she could hide from the stairs. But in that moment, the worlds of the rich and the poor collided, and neither hers nor Edward's life would ever be the same again. That evening, while most of her classmates prepared for parties or late-night study groups, Grace stood behind an old upright piano in the corner of a dimly lit lounge. The soft glow of lamps spilled across polished tables, the hum of quiet conversations mingled with the gentle clinking of glasses. Her fingers moved slowly across the keys, her body weary but her mind refusing to give in. This job mattered. Every little note she played, every small tip she earned, was one step closer to paying Daniel's next hospital deposit. She had promised him she wouldn't fail. The door creaked open, and Grace's heart nearly stopped. Edward Walker entered. The same commanding presence that silenced a lecture hall earlier in the day now shifted the atmosphere of the lounge. Staff straightened. Guests whispered. He didn't notice her at first. He ordered a drink, his tone clipped but polite. But when his eyes wandered across the room, they froze on her. Grace almost missed a note. Her hands trembled, but she forced herself to continue playing. Edward rose from his seat and walked toward the piano, his steps steady, purposeful. "I see you work here," he said quietly, his voice low enough for her alone. "Even after fainting this morning, you're still pushing yourself into the night." Grace kept her eyes on the keys. "I don't have a choice, sir." Edward pulled out a chair, sitting near her. "Why?" he pressed. "You're one of the best students in your department. I've seen your records, and yet you're working yourself to exhaustion. Why?" The melody faltered. For a long moment she said nothing, but finally her whisper broke the silence. "My tuition is overdue. 20,000. If I don't pay, they'll withdraw me." She swallowed hard, her voice shaking. "And my brother, he's been in a coma for 2 years. The hospital demands deposits I can barely manage. Some days, I can't even afford food." Her fingers stilled on the keys, shame pressing heavily on her chest. Edward leaned back, studying her. For the first time, she looked fragile. Not just tired. Her words pierced him in a way boardroom speeches and billion-dollar deals never had. After a pause, he spoke in the calm, direct tone of a man used to closing deals. "I can give you 500,000. Grace's head snapped up, disbelief flashing in her eyes. "What?" 500,000, he repeated firmly. "But one night. With me." The words landed like a heavy stone. Grace's throat tightened. Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear the piano's fading hum. No, I can't." She shook her head quickly. "You're my lecturer. How could I face you after that?" Edward's lips curved slightly, not mocking, but steady, logical. "I was only a guest speaker. Today was my last lecture. The university invited me, but my time is already full with my company. I won't be teaching again." The excuse she clung to slipped away. Her chest ached. She saw Daniel's pale face in her mind, heard the nurses demanding money, felt the weight of all her late nights. She whispered to herself, "How could I live with myself?" Edward's eyes softened just for a moment. "Sometimes survival leaves no easy choices. You don't have to like me. Just take what you need." Grace blinked back tears. Pride screamed at her to walk away, but desperation tied her to the seat. After a long silence, she whispered, "Then I guess I don't have a choice." Edward stood, extending his hand. Grace stared at it, trembling, before placing her hand in his. The night that followed would bind them together in ways neither fully understood, not just by a deal, but by the silent collision of two worlds neither of them could escape. The pale light of dawn slipped through the wide glass windows. Grace stirred, her body heavy from a night of restless sleep. For a fleeting moment she forgot where she was until her eyes caught the tall figure standing at the balcony, sipping water in his pressed suit. Edward Walker. Reality rushed back. She sat up quickly, clutching the oversized shirt she had borrowed the night before. Shame, fear, and exhaustion swirled inside her chest. She reached for her bag, her mind already racing to her part-time shift later that day. "I need to go," she whispered, avoiding his eyes. Edward turned, his sharp gaze softening for a fraction of a second. "You're leaving without eating. You're weak, Grace. Last night was your first time. Your body is fragile. You can't keep surviving on snacks and cheap food." Her breath caught, he had noticed. "I'll have the staff prepare something," he continued. "Eat before you leave." Grace shook her head, gripping her bag tighter. "No, please. This was the last time. I won't be back." Edward's jaw tightened. "So that's it? You want to walk away and pretend this never happened?" Her voice trembled. "Yes, I can't have a future with you. I just needed the money." For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy and sharp. Then Edward asked quietly, almost too softly, "Grace, do you want to be with me?" Her chest tightened. Her lips parted, but pride forced the words out. "No, there is no future for us." Edward's expression returned to an unreadable calm, but his eyes lingered on her longer than she expected. She turned away, reaching for the door, only to pause. Her heart raced with shame as she forced the words out. When will you transfer the money? Edward's lips curved slightly, almost amused at her bluntness. He pulled out his phone, tapped a few times. A buzz echoed from her bag. Grace opened her phone and gasped. 1 million? Her eyes widened. You promised 500. I changed my mind, Edward said casually. He reached into his wallet and handed her a sleek black card. Use it whenever you need. Spend it as you like. Grace's hand shook as she took it, then almost instantly shoved it back at him. No, I don't want charity. I'll only take what I earned. Nothing more. Edward's brow lifted, a flicker of admiration crossing his face. Fine. Then keep the transfer. But give me your number. Her throat went dry. Why? Because I asked, he said simply. Reluctantly, Grace typed her number into his phone. He saved it without another word. That afternoon, as she prepared for her piano lounge shift, her phone lit up. Edward calling. She stared at the screen, her hands trembling. Her heart screamed shame and fear. She pressed decline. The phone rang again. She blocked his number, tears pricking her eyes. No, she whispered to herself, hugging her knees in her small rented room. It was only desperation. My tuition. Daniel's bills. That's all. I can't go back. I won't sell myself again. Meanwhile, in his office, Edward sat behind his glass desk, scrolling through his phone. Call after call went unanswered. He leaned back, frustration burning in his chest. She blocked me, he muttered. His jaw clenched. His secretary walked in with documents, but Edward barely looked up. His mind was stuck on her, the quiet girl who dared to reject his money. She was only with me for survival, he told himself. But then he whispered under his breath, so why can't I stop thinking about her? And in that silence, Edward realized something terrifying. Grace Martin was no ordinary girl. She had unsettled him in a way no one else ever had. The next morning, Grace walked briskly across the campus lawn, clutching her worn-out notebooks to her chest. She kept her head low, but the whispers around her felt like daggers. There she goes again, with her soya milk and dry buns. Maybe she thinks it's a diet plan. Look how skinny she's getting. She should be a food hawker, not a student. Grace bit her lip, forcing herself not to react. She sat quietly in the lecture hall, unwrapping the same meal she had eaten the night before, a carton of soy milk and 2 dry buns. She chewed slowly, trying to drown out the cruel laughter echoing behind her. Then the mocking grew louder. Sophia Grant entered, tall, radiant, dressed in a fitted designer dress that glittered under the hall lights. Her hair was sleek, her makeup flawless. All eyes turned toward her, just as she wanted. She glanced at Grace, smirk tugging at her lips, before raising her voice loud enough for the class to hear. Look at her acting so innocent with her little buns. Don't be fooled. Girls like her survive on their looks. Snickers rippled through the hall. Some students pulled out their phones, recording quietly. Grace's face burned, but she forced her eyes onto her notebook, her pen scratching furiously. She fainted last week just to get attention, Sophia continued, rolling her eyes. Probably has some sugar daddy paying her bills. You'll see. The laughter was louder now. Grace's hands trembled. She gripped her pen so tightly her knuckles turned white. But she refused to cry. She refused to give Sophia the satisfaction. Then silence. The lecture hall door opened, and in walked Edward Walker. His presence changed everything. Conversations died mid-sentence. Students straightened in their seats, wide-eyed. Some whispered excitedly, "Professor Edward, he's back." Grace's stomach dropped. Her pen nearly slipped. Why is he here? He had told her that his lecture was the last. He wasn't supposed to return. Edward strode to the front, calm and unreadable. He placed his notes on the desk, his gaze sweeping across the hall. For the briefest moment, his eyes landed on Grace. She froze, her heart pounding, pretending to scribble as though she hadn't noticed. He began, his deep voice commanding instant attention. Economics is not only about numbers, it is about choices, hard choices. Every decision has a price. Sometimes survival pushes us into paths we never imagined. The students leaned forward, hanging on his words, but Grace couldn't concentrate. His voice seemed aimed at her, every sentence pulling her deeper into a storm she didn't want to face. Beside her, Sophia leaned closer to her friends, smirking. "See how red Grace's face is? I told you. Who knows what dirty things she's been doing behind closed doors?" The whispers spread like wildfire, followed by giggles. Grace shut her eyes briefly, her chest tightening. She wanted to disappear. When the lecture ended, she rushed to gather her books, her only thought to escape before Edward saw her. But as she reached the doorway, a familiar, deep voice stopped her cold. "Grace." Her breath caught. Slowly she turned. Edward stood waiting, his eyes locked on hers, ignoring the curious glances of students passing by. "Why didn't you return my calls?" His tone was calm, but it carried a quiet edge. Grace's throat tightened. She looked away. "Because I don't need you, Mr. Walker. That night, it was a mistake. I don't want you interfering in my life." His jaw clenched, but his voice stayed even. "So you regret it?" Her eyes finally met his, blazing with a mix of shame and pride. "I don't regret surviving. But don't confuse one desperate night with anything else. I am fine on my own." For a long moment, Edward studied her, as though searching for cracks in her words. Then slowly he stepped aside, letting her go. Grace walked past him quickly, her heart pounding. She told herself it was over. But deep down, she knew the battle between pride, desperation, and something she dared not name had only just begun. That night, Grace sat behind the piano again, her fingers gliding softly over the worn keys. The dim lounge lights cast long shadows across the room, the hum of quiet voices and clinking glasses filling the air. Each note she played was a plea for strength, for Daniel's life, for a future she could hardly imagine. The manager approached, sliding an envelope of cash across the piano top. "Good job tonight. Half your payment up front, the rest after." "Thank you," she whispered, relief flickering in her tired eyes. But her relief shattered in seconds. 3 rough-looking men pushed through the lounge doors, their heavy steps echoing as they headed straight for her. One slammed his hand onto the piano. "You." His voice was harsh, his glare burning. "You took money that wasn't yours." Grace's fingers froze on the keys. "What? No, I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie," another barked, grabbing her arm. "You think you can play smart with Michael? You won't see tomorrow morning if you don't return what you stole." Her heart pounded. Fear rooted her to the bench. "Please," she begged, her voice trembling. "I never took anything. I don't even know who Michael is." The man's grip tightened. The lounge seemed to shrink. The patron shrinking back, unwilling to interfere. Grace's breath caught in her throat until a commanding voice cut through the noise. "Enough." The thugs froze. From the shadows, 2 tall figures emerged, dressed in black suits. Their presence was quiet but terrifying. Grace recognized them instantly, Edward's bodyguards. One stepped forward, his tone low and lethal. "If you value your lives, let her go. Now." The thugs hesitated, exchanging uneasy glances. With a muttered curse, the leader released her arm. They backed away slowly, vanishing into the night. Grace's chest heaved, her knees trembling. She clutched her bag, too shaken to move. One of the guards leaned close, his voice low. "Come with us, quickly." They guided her behind the piano through a narrow corridor she had never noticed before. A hidden door creaked open, revealing a dark passage. She followed, her legs barely holding her up. By the time they stepped into the cool night air, Grace's body shook with relief and fear. The guard gave her a single look. "You're safe now. Go home." She wanted to ask why, wanted to know how Edward always seemed to appear when she least expected, when she most needed it. But her throat tightened. She simply nodded and walked away into the night. Every step home felt heavier. There was no denying it now. Edward's shadow stretched across her life. Even when she swore she wanted nothing more to do with him, he was there silent, powerful, watching over her. And in her heart, a terrifying thought grew louder. Was she really free of him at all? The next morning, Grace walked into the bursar's office, clutching a small envelope of cash money scraped together from tutoring sessions and long nights at the lounge. It wasn't enough to clear her tuition, but it was something. Anything. The woman at the counter looked up. "Name?" "Grace Martin," she said softly, sliding the envelope forward. The woman typed into the computer, then paused. Her brows rose. "Miss Martin, you don't owe anything." Grace blinked. "What? That can't be right. I still owe—" The woman turned the screen toward her. "Not anymore. Your tuition has been fully paid. Not just for this semester, for the entire year, and there's a scholarship attached to your record. You won't need to pay again until graduation." "Congratulations." Grace's mouth went dry. She staggered back a step, the room spinning. Who could have done this? That afternoon, as she walked across the campus, a classmate leaned close, whispering conspiratorially. "I saw something strange yesterday. A man in a suit, not a parent, more like a businessman, came to the bursar's office. I heard him mention your name." Grace's chest tightened. She didn't need to hear more. She already knew. By evening, she found him. Edward was just leaving the lecture hall when she appeared, her hands clenched at her sides, her face pale with fury. "Why?" she demanded, her voice trembling. He looked at her calmly. "Why what?" "My tuition," she snapped. "The scholarship. Was that you?" Edward's face remained unreadable. "Does it matter who paid? What matters is you can focus on your studies now." Grace's fist shook. "Don't lie to me, Edward. I know it was you. Why? Do you pity me? Do you think I'm some charity case you can throw money at?" For the first time, his eyes softened. His voice was quiet, steady. "Grace, you said you needed help. I gave it, that's all." Her chest burned with humiliation. "That's not all. This—" Her voice broke as tears threatened. "This strips me of my dignity. I worked for every little thing I have, and now it feels like none of it is mine." Edward stepped closer, his gaze fixed on her. "Does it really matter if it came from me? What matters is your brother gets care and you can breathe. Isn't that what you wanted?" Grace shook her head hard, her voice cracking. "No, not like this. I don't want your pity. I don't want to feel owned." With that, she turned away, her shoulders trembling, leaving him standing in the fading light, hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. But as Edward watched her storm off, one truth cut deep into his chest. He wasn't helping her out of pity. He was helping her because he couldn't stop himself. And that frightened him more than he cared to admit. That evening, Edward sat in the family dining room, posture straight, eyes fixed on the polished table. Across from him, Margaret Walker lifted her teacup with slow elegance, her voice carrying the sharpness of command. "Edward," she said, setting the cup down, "it is time you settled down. Enough of this wandering. A man of your status cannot remain single. People are watching." He stayed silent, jaw tight. Margaret continued. "I've already spoken with the Wilson family. Janet will make the perfect wife. Her father is influential in politics. Their family will strengthen ours. You will marry her." Edward looked up, his eyes cold but steady. "Mother, I already have someone." Her eyebrow arched. "A girlfriend? Who?" "You don't know her," he lied smoothly. "But she's the one I want." Margaret's lips thinned. "If she doesn't come from a family of status, she is not suitable. You will destroy everything your father built. Think carefully, Edward." His fists tightened beneath the table, but he said nothing more. Days later, Janet Wilson began appearing at his side. At charity banquets, at business galas, at political dinners. Always smiling, always graceful, as if she were already his fiancée. Grace wasn't supposed to see it. But one evening, passing by the lobby of a grand hotel, she froze. There he was, Edward, in a dark suit. Janet in a flowing red gown, standing close, their laughter soft and easy. Her chest constricted, her breath shallow. She stepped back quickly, but not before hearing Janet's sweet voice drift through the air. "You know, Edward, we make such a good pair. Everyone says so." Grace's stomach knotted, her eyes burned. "So that's what I am. Just a shadow in the dark, while he keeps women like her for the world to see?" The next day, she found him alone on campus. Her voice trembled with fury and pain. "Why are you doing this?" Edward looked up surprised. "Doing what?" "Parading around with that woman while you—" Her throat tightened. "While you interfere in my life, pay my bills, act like you care." His expression hardened. "Grace." "No," she cut him off, tears brimming. "Don't pretend with me. You gave me money, you paid my fees, you even saved me from trouble. But in the end, I'm nothing to you, am I? Just another girl in the shadows, while Janet shines in the light." Her words hung heavy, slicing the air between them. Edward's jaw clenched, his eyes dark, but for once he said nothing. Grace turned away, her heart breaking with every step. She had told herself it was only desperation, only survival. But the truth stabbed at her now. She had fallen for him. And seeing him beside Janet was like a knife twisting deeper into her soul. "Why does it hurt this much?" she thought, swallowing her sobs. "I told myself it was just about money. Just about Daniel, so why can't I let him go?" Grace waited for him outside the lecture hall, her chest heaving as students poured out in clusters of chatter. She had spent the night replaying the image of Edward and Janet laughing together, side by side, as though they belonged to a world she could never touch. And when he finally stepped out, she didn't wait. "Why?" she demanded, her voice sharp, trembling with emotion. Edward stopped, his brows knitting. "Why what?" "Why do you keep showing up in my life, pretending you care, while you flaunt Janet Wilson in public as if she's your bride already?" Her eyes glistened, but she refused to let the tears fall. "Do you think I don't see? Do you think I don't feel it?" His expression darkened, but he didn't speak. Grace's voice cracked, louder now. "You're just like the others, aren't you? Using me in secret, throwing money at me to ease your conscience, while the world sees you with her." Edward's jaw tightened, his silence unbearable. He didn't deny it. He didn't explain. Her heart ached. "I was desperate, and you knew it. You gave me money, paid my tuition, saved me when I was cornered. But don't twist it into something it's not. I should have known better. I don't belong in your world." The words trembled on her lips, but once spoken, they sliced her as much as they did him. Edward finally spoke, his voice low, almost pleading beneath its calm. "Grace." She shook her head violently, cutting him off. Don't say my name like it means anything to you." For a moment, their eyes locked, his filled with frustration he wouldn't show, hers with pain she couldn't hide. Then she turned sharply, her footsteps quick, her breath uneven as she disappeared down the hallway. Edward remained rooted where he stood, fists clenched at his sides, his jaw rigid. He could command boardroom, silence rivals, bend empires with a single decision, but in front of Grace he was powerless. And as Grace walked away, tears finally spilling down her cheeks, she whispered to herself, "This was never supposed to happen. It was only survival, only for Daniel. So why does it feel like losing him is breaking me in two?" The call came just after dawn. Grace had barely slept, her eyes swollen from the tears she had fought all night. "Hello, is this Miss Martin?" The voice on the line was urgent. "This is City General Hospital. It's about your brother. His condition has worsened. You need to come as soon as possible." Her knees buckled. The phone nearly slipped from her grasp. I'll be there," she whispered, her voice shaking. Within the hour, she was at Daniel's bedside, her trembling hands clutching his pale fingers. Tubes surrounded him, the steady beep of machines filling the sterile room. Grace leaned over him, tears spilling freely now. "Please, Daniel," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You can't leave me. Not now. I've given up so much. Don't make me lose you too." The doctor entered, his face solemn. "We'll do our best, but without a significant deposit, we can't move forward with the next phase of treatment." The words cut through her like glass. Grace lowered her head, her shoulders trembling. She had nothing left to give. Every coin she had scraped together was already gone. Later that day, she dragged herself to class, her body present but her mind miles away. She sat at the back, staring blankly at her notes. Edward stood at the podium delivering another guest lecture, but his eyes flickered toward her again and again. He noticed her silence, her slumped shoulders, her pale face. Grace wasn't even pretending to listen. When the class ended, she tried to slip past him quickly, but Edward blocked her path. "What's wrong?" His voice was low, unusually gentle. She forced a brittle smile. "Nothing, I'm fine." "Don't lie to me, Grace." Her eyes darted away. "It's none of your business. Please, don't bother." Before he could press further, she pushed past him. Her footsteps hurried, her back straight, as if pride alone held her up. Edward remained behind, his jaw tight. For the first time, he saw past her walls. Something was breaking inside her, and he hated that she wouldn't let him in. Back in his office, he pulled out his phone, his voice clipped. "Find out everything about Grace Martin. Now." Hours later, the file landed on his desk. He flipped through it silently, each page cutting deeper into him. Parents gone. A brother in a coma for 2 years. Hospital debts stacked higher than her future could carry. Nights spent working 3 jobs just to keep afloat. And yet, despite it all, her grades, excellent. Edward leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling, his throat tight. Grace had been carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders, all alone with no one to fight for her. And for the first time, the man who thought he didn't need anyone admitted to himself, "I can't let her keep fighting alone." Grace sat at Daniel's bedside, her hands wrapped tightly around his. The doctor's words replayed in her mind like a cruel echo. "Without a deposit, we can't proceed." She wanted to scream, to fight, but exhaustion chained her spirit. For 2 years she had carried this battle alone. Now it felt like the end. That night, as she dozed fitfully by Daniel's side, the nurse approached quietly. "Miss Martin," she whispered, "the deposit has been made. Your brother's treatment can continue." Grace sat bolt upright. "What? Who?" The nurse shrugged gently. It was an anonymous payment. Grace's heart raced. She didn't need to guess. She already knew. The next morning she stormed into the campus courtyard. Edward was there, speaking with a colleague. She marched straight up to him, fury and humiliation burning her voice. "Why?" she demanded. "Why can't you just leave me alone?" He met her eyes calmly. "Because you needed help." "I don't need your charity," she cried, her voice cracking. "Every time you step into my life, you make me feel smaller. We're not equals, Edward. I can't live like that." His expression hardened, but his voice softened. "Grace, you think this is pity. It isn't. He paused, the words nearly slipping out, but pride stopped him. "Forget it. Believe what you want." She shook her head, tears spilling. "You'll never understand. Not you, with your money and power. You'll never understand what it means to fight for dignity." And with that she walked away, leaving him standing in the crowd, his chest heavy with words he couldn't bring himself to say. Edward returned home that evening to find his mother waiting, arms crossed, pearls glinting at her neck. "You've embarrassed me, Edward," Margaret said coldly. "Everyone is talking about you and this girl. You will end this nonsense at once and announce your engagement to Janet." Edward's jaw tightened. "No." Margaret's eyes widened in shock. "Excuse me?" "I said no." His voice was calm but firm. "I won't marry Janet, and I won't let you dictate the rest of my life." Her glare could have cut glass. "If you choose this girl, you will destroy our reputation. You will destroy everything your father built." Edward met her eyes, unflinching. "Then I will build something of my own." Margaret's lips trembled with fury, but Edward turned and walked away, for the first time choosing his heart over his family's expectations. Meanwhile, Grace faced a different storm. Sophia had spread new rumors, whispering that Grace was nothing more than Edward Walker's kept woman. Students giggled when she passed, some even pointing at her phone with smirks. Grace ignored them until Sophia cornered her one afternoon in the lecture hall. "Tell me, Grace," Sophia sneered, "how much does he pay you? Enough to buy new shoes at least?" Laughter rippled. Grace's cheeks burned, but instead of snapping back, she stood tall. Her voice was steady, clear, and loud enough for the room to hear. "I'm not ashamed of working for my survival. I tutor. I play piano. I serve food. I do what I must because I refuse to give up. If you think survival is weakness, then you've never known real strength." The room fell silent. Even Sophia faltered, her smirk fading. For the first time, Grace had answered not with tears, but with dignity. That evening, Edward waited outside the hospital. When Grace appeared, weary and defensive, he stepped forward. "Grace," he said softly, "I need you to hear me." She shook her head. "Edward, please." "No," he cut in firmly. For once his cold composure cracked, his voice raw. "This isn't pity. This isn't charity. I can't stop thinking about you. I've tried, Grace, I have. But you're in my head, in my heart, in places I never thought anyone could reach." Her breath caught. "You fight when the world wants you to break. You stand when others would fall. You're the strongest person I know, and His voice trembled. "I don't want to own you. I just want to stand beside you." Tears welled in her eyes. She wanted to believe him, but fear chained her heart. "Edward, I don't know if I can trust you." "Then let me prove it," he said simply. Weeks passed. Daniel's treatment began to show progress, his doctors cautiously hopeful. Grace still worked, still studied, but for the first time she wasn't alone. Edward kept his distance at her request, but quietly supported from the shadows, proving his patience. One crisp morning, Grace visited the hospital. Daniel's fingers twitched. His eyes fluttered open, weak but alive. "Grace." His voice was a whisper. Her knees buckled as tears streamed down her face. "Daniel, you came back to me." At that moment, she knew survival had been worth every sacrifice. Months later, Grace stood at the university podium, receiving an award for academic excellence. Students who once mocked her now applauded. Her voice was clear as she addressed them. True strength isn't about money or status. It's about refusing to give up, even when life tries to break you. Dignity isn't found in wealth. It's found in endurance, in faith, and in love. In the crowd, Edward watched silently, pride in his eyes. Grace met his gaze, and for the first time she didn't look away. Because now she knew her story was no longer about survival. It was about redemption, about rising, not as a victim, but as a victor.